Under Category A, the aliases and biography of Wallace D. Ford. Wallace Ford joined the Moore Science Temple of America in 1929 after he got out of prison. That group taught that blacks were Asiatics, their religion was Islam, their God was Allah, and their holy book was the Quran. Under Category B for Wallace D. Farad, Wallace Farad taught that blacks were Asiatics, their religion was Islam, their God was Allah, and their holy book was the Quran. Under Category A for Wallace D. Ford, Hazel Ford said she received letters from Wallace Ford from only two places after he got out of prison: Chicago, Illinois, and Detroit, Michigan. Under Category B for Wallace Farad, the Nation of Islam's main two temples were located in Chicago, Illinois, and Detroit, Michigan. Under Category A for Wallace D. Ford, no birth certificate could be verified for Wallace Ford, Fred Dodd, or any of the aliases Ford used. Under Category B for Wallace D. Farad, no birth certificate could be verified for Wallace Farad, Master Farad Muhammad, or any of the aliases he used. Under Category A for Wallace Ford, Wallace Ford's main occupation was that of a cook when he wasn't selling drugs. He operated a lunch wagon in Portland, Oregon in 1913 when he first arrived in the United States. And he operated a cafe in Los Angeles, California from 1920 to 1926. Under Category B for Wallace Farad, Wallace Farad impressed early members with his cooking skills. He introduced the recipe for the bean pie. He taught members to cook with brown sugar as opposed to white sugar. He taught them to cook with vegetable oil as opposed to lard or fat. Elijah Muhammad detailed Fard's cooking techniques in a book titled How to Eat to Live. Under Category A for Wallace Ford, Hazel Ford stated to FBI agents in 1957 that after Ford got out of prison in 1929, he stayed in contact with her on a regular basis up until the spring of 1933. She stated that the last time she saw him was in 1933, and she have not seen or heard from him since. Under Category B for Wallace Farad, Elijah Muhammad said that Farad left Chicago in June of 1934. However, there are no public records indicating Fard was still in Chicago up until June of 1934. After Master Farad Muhammad was released from jail in Chicago in 1933, he disappeared without a trace. He has not been seen nor heard from since. In speeches monitored by the FBI, Elijah Muhammad said that when Wallace Farad was told by local police in 1933 to get out of Detroit, he went to Chicago that same year and was immediately arrested there. In May of 1957, the Chicago field office contacted the Chicago Police Department's Records and Communications section to determine whether it had any records relating to Fard's arrest in 1933. On May 8, that office advised the Bureau that its records contained no information indicating any arrest for W.D. Fard. The records did, however, have an entry pertaining to the arrest of a Wallace Ford in September of 1933. According to documents in the city's records warehouse, quasi-criminal complaint number 3227492 dealt with the arrest of a Wallace Ford of Detroit on September 25, 1933. Now check this out. Ford is back in Chicago being arrested. This is supposed to be Fard being arrested. What happened to Fard? Ford, who was delivering a typical sermon about the evils of the white race, was arrested at 3 p.m. after a citizen called to complain that a con man was stirring up black people who had gathered at a house near the intersection of 48th Street and Calumet in Chicago. During the booking process, Ford described himself as a 40-year-old unemployed Negro from Detroit. Ford was charged with disorderly conduct and the next morning appeared before a Judge Dunn and was subsequently discharged. According to records, Ford listed his address as Detroit, Michigan. Sex male, race colored, age 40, weight 132 pounds, height 5 feet 7 inches, slender build, black hair, dark brown eyes. Notice Ford's age as being 40 years old. This would coincide with his birth date of February 26, 1893. The same exact birth date that Wally Dodd Fard listed on his World War I draft card in 1917, where Ford is in parentheses next to his last name, which was Fard. In conclusion, Wally Dodd Fard was born in New Zealand on February 26, 1893. Fard arrived in the United States in 1913, briefly settling in Portland, Oregon, before traveling on to California. His FBI number is 56062. California Bureau of Identification and Investigation listed him as Wallace Ford, their number 1797924. At San Quentin State Prison, he was listed as Wally D. Ford, serial number 42314. Michigan State Police listed him as Wallace Farad, their number 98076. All of the above carry the same fingerprints. In all cases, he is listed as Caucasian. When Elijah Poole met him, he was passing himself off as a savior and claiming that he was born in Mecca and had arrived in the United States on Independence Day, July 4th, 1930. When he last visited his common-law wife, Hazel Ford, in the spring of 1933, Farad announced to her that he was returning to New Zealand, reportedly the land of his birth, as close to Mecca as he has ever been. Wallace Muhammad, Elijah's son, stated that his father was misled by Farad. There is a wealth of proof of who this guy who called himself Master Farad Muhammad really was. He had an extensive criminal history. His criminal activity awarded him the opportunity to be arrested, photographed, and fingerprinted, which set the foundation that sealed his true identity. Had Wally Dodd Fard not been involved in criminal activity, we probably would not know today who he really was. Fard's criminal history is extensive and recorded as far back as 1918. There are municipal records, state records, federal records, prison records, photographs, fingerprints, and a World War I draft card on file at the National Archives, located in Washington, D.C. Master Fard Muhammad was a master at remaking himself with aliases. Although his name changed many times, his fingerprints were always the same. The FBI has fingerprints of Wallace D. Fard when he was arrested in Los Angeles in 1918 for assault with a deadly weapon. They have fingerprints of Wally Ford when he was in prison at San Quentin in 1926, and they have fingerprints of Wallace D. Fard from the Detroit Police Department when he was arrested there in 1933. The FBI stated that these fingerprints all belong to the same person. Wali Dodd Fard was simply a 1930s Depression-era con man who preyed on the illiteracy of poor, gullible blacks who had left the racist, segregated South and traveled north seeking a better way of life. Master Wallace Fard Muhammad was there to greet them with false promises, fanatical beliefs, myths, and fairy tales.